Okay, hello everyone. It's that time again, the time of year when we realize that all artists are not white men, and so we talk about an African American female artist. Last year we did that too, but this Faith Ringgold is our artist, and she happened to be in the rotation. This has been done. She has been done before, 5 years ago, and so it's prepped. I think it's a good, easy project. I think it is a good reminder and good to talk about maybe some more modern and some women artists. So let's look at her. And hopefully you've had fun with Da Vinci. I did 3 different classes, and I thought it was neat to see kids who didn't think they could draw just like actually trying it. And even to see what kindergartners drew was really fun. So let's see if I can get the PowerPoint. Here we go. So here's Faith Ringgold, and she is still alive. And I guess she's, what, like 88? So you guys maybe you think you don't know who she is. But when you see the book that she's written at the end, you'll probably remember reading it as a kid. If you're around my age, which you probably are. Okay, so she was born in Harlem. Interesting thing about her was she had really bad asthma, so she would stay home a lot from school. Her mom was a fashion designer and a seamstress, and so she would play with different kinds of fabrics, and this would become her medium later on. So she started really young. She got a fine arts degree. She was a teacher for a long time and did traditional painting. But eventually she changed to being an artist. She calls it, what does she call it? I have it later on. Soft sculpture. That becomes her medium. Some people recognize it as quilt making, but it's her goal was basically to take that medium of art that is often relegated to just like craft and not really seen as high art at all, and to make it into high art, what we would see at a museum. And she came from a line of women who made quilts. Her great-great-grandmother was a slave who made quilts for the plantation owner. Her mom made quilts, so she wanted to honor that tradition and raise it up. So first thing to look at is maybe just like some traditional quilt block patterns. You know, I really wish that I had a quilt to bring in. I mean, I have pictures of quilts that we're going to show them, but most kids have probably seen one. I'll have to, I don't have a traditional quilt. So maybe in the email, I'll ask if anybody does that we could kind of have in there for kids to look at, but we'll see what we can do. Okay, so it's a repeated pattern. You piece the quilt together. And so it's sewing. It's not the normal and fabric, not the normal art medium, but we're going to see how really it is a work of art. And so this is a traditional bear claw quilt. You can talk about it. There's a layer with the pattern, and there's the batting in the middle. They're sewn together. And it was a way to use like every last piece of fabric. So this is a tradition, very much not like a rich tradition. Oh, I mean, it's a rich tradition in like being, I don't know what the word is, but I meant like moneyed. This was something that more humble people would make. But there's also something called a tonka, which is a form of art made in Tibet that is very beautiful, very admired. I mean, and it's basically, Ringgold wanted to point out, like, look, these are clearly beautiful works of art. They are made from fabric. They're silk embroidery. It's not that much different from a quilt. I mean, this is They're like fabric paintings, fabric sculpture. And so she was inspired by these tankas to be like, okay, wait, all the quilts that like my ancestors have made, they're art too, just like this is. And so she started to make her own. This one, Echoes of Harlem, this is her first painted quilt. So she would actually paint the images onto the fabric squares, which sounds really, really difficult to me. And then her mom, who was the seamstress, would help her piece and sew the quilt together. These are all just people that she remembers from growing up in Harlem. Her next, or another one that's really famous, Who's Afraid of Aunt Jemima? I don't know how. I mean, Aunt Jemima, we all know, is the maple syrup lady. Is not really, I don't know, not usually seen as a positive image of African Americans. So she's addressing that stereotype of Black women, of African American women, but she's, obviously painting pictures of women that she knows and kind of poking fun at this image of Aunt Jemima and showing like this isn't really who we are. Okay, so Dancing at the Louvre. I think this is good because we just talked about Da Vinci. There's the Mona Lisa right there. So it'd be interesting to talk about this maybe more with older kids, which is how women have not produced a lot of art or what people consider art that goes into museums until the past maybe 100, 200 years. A lot of what's in museums is painted by men. A lot of them are white because they had the money, which equals time and privilege. Not all of them, but those who were successful had the time and the privilege to pursue art. And a lot of women were not given that opportunity throughout time. They would make pottery and, clothing and things like that, but that it hasn't been valued as art. And so Ringgold wants to challenge that idea. And she's showing these African American women and girls dancing in front of these pictures by famous artists. Da Vinci's Mona Lisa is right there in the middle, to kind of show that they're not really into it. They're doing their own thing. They're dancing, showing that there's like a disconnect between maybe that woman that was painted and a real female experience that they're having. And just, but I think the main thing, like showing how, okay, she wants to show that her art is just as meaningful as these great artists. But even though it's not often valued that way, and just challenging the fact that, quilts, these things that women have made for hundreds of years should be valued as art. Okay, oops, I just went back. Okay, here's a sunflower quilting bee. I'm not sure how to say that correctly, Arles. But this is Vincent van Gogh here in the corner, you can see. So it's showing a quilting bee. There are famous African-American women. I have all the names of them in the outline. Sadly, I feel I know maybe half of them. I should know more. But then there's Van Gogh in the background. They're in his field of sunflowers making their quilt. And you can maybe talk to the kids. Why do you think she included Van Gogh in this? What is she trying to tell us? I'm not going to give an answer. But you might get some interesting ideas there. Tar Beach. So this is the book that you may or may not remember reading as a child. But so she made this quilt. So she would make these story quilts. You can see that there's words on these quilts. Is there? Yeah, there's a story around the quilting bee one. So she's putting words on her artwork too and telling, like literally telling us the story. And somebody had the idea. There's this girl, she's flying over New York City. that you should turn this into a book. It already has a story around the perimeter. So she did. She turned it into a book that got a Caldecott honor, and many people have read. We are going to have it for you to read if you want. I think that for the younger grades, you can probably just do the book and maybe go through the slides quickly. I think there are some important things in there, but mainly focus on the book. Maybe for the older grades, maybe put the focus more on the PowerPoint. I think it's kind of a younger book, but still an important book. So you can decide how you want to do that. We're going to have it on the art cart. You can read a book in the art room by putting it under the projector screen. However, we've had so many difficulties with the technology. If you want to do that, you're welcome to. I'm going to keep the book on the art cart. I think it'd be better to just read it in the classroom if you want to do that. Okay, so anyways, on to the project. So in this book, she talks about this girl who, has this, we assume it's imaginary, but she talks about it like it's real, that she can fly all over New York City. So the project is, if you could fly, where would you go and why? And so they're going to make like a little quilt and write about what they would do. And so there's some examples actually on this PowerPoint that somebody from 5 years ago made. And I thought, oh, that's awesome. We already have samples and they can be on the projector, which I think is so much easier. And the kids know exactly, what it's going to look like. And I think it should be fun. I think it should be good to talk about someone that, maybe they haven't heard of, and maybe a different kind of artist. So basically, they're each going to have a square. A square paper is pretty heavy paper. Oh, I don't have it with me. I'm going to have a glue. They're going to have glue. And I have a bunch of squares of just regular paper. I'm going to cut out a bunch of these, but there's probably not going to be enough for the whole school. I think younger kids, you can probably give them the squares. Older kids, you can just give them the paper and they can cut out their own. And they're not all perfectly square, or they're not going to be the perfect size, because they have some leeway as to how big they want to do that. So if they want to cut the squares a little bit down to size, they certainly can if you're giving out the pre-cut ones. So we have just colored ones, and then we have patterned ones. Each kid should only use like, say, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I haven't cut them yet. Say 4 or 5 patterned ones, if we're going to have enough for the whole school. And that's how it is on those samples too, where there's just a few patterned ones and colored ones. So they do that on the border, and then they can draw a picture of if you could fly, where would you go and why? And they can write at the bottom like their little story, just like Ringgold did, and she wrote her story on her quilts. I don't have a label. I thought that might, I don't know, it would kind of ruin the look of it, I think, to have the label on there. And it would be hard because I wanted to do a square. I wanted to be big enough for them to do the border and do their picture. They're just going to do the picture with colored pencils. I have a bunch of those in the closet. So paper, white paper, colored pencils, cut paper, glue. Pretty easy. You read the book and or go through the PowerPoint, but you do want to use the PowerPoint for the examples that are at the end, because I'm not going to make new ones. They're just on there for you to use. So those are basically the supplies. I'm imagining a lot of people are probably going to want to do it in the classroom. I think this is an easy one to do in the classroom. They can use their own glue in the classroom. I'll have some on the art cart, but we probably need most of it in the art room. I'm trying to think if there's, so just use a few of the pattern ones. They can draw whatever they want. I think it would be fun at the end to have them share, or at least get those who want to share what they drew. I mean, my one concern with the project is if like 5th graders are too cool for this. I don't know. I'll find out because I teach a 5th grade class. Hopefully not. I think it could be fun. Like, well, there was one where it's like, I would go to Candyland, or I mean, they can just do whatever. It's just in honor of her, and to get them thinking about, hey, art comes in many different forms, and it would be fun to put them up if you ever hang for the classroom, to piece them together like a quilt, like when you hang them, like to put them all together, close together, so it kind of looks like a quilt. But if you're not in charge of that, don't worry about it. Anyways, hopefully that's gonna be fun and straightforward. And yeah, thank you for all that you do. And let me know if you have any questions.